Of times.
Hello, Bambos Dimitriou. Welcome to another day
of a wonderful chaos.
How does it feel to be here today?
It's okay.
Yeah, great. Great way to start the day. Feel so motivated. Anything special go on to give you that wonder?
This morning, I just didn't want to get out of bed.
Oh, really?
I think you saw that I posted at 5 a.m.
I don't know. I didn't see that. No, I was up at 4, so I didn't. Anything afterwards was. Everyone was in the middle of their day, as far as I was concerned.
5 a.m, and then eventually, 5:15, I managed to get myself out of bed and start the day.
Oh, wow! Any reason for that?
You know, COVID hasn't been kind to my business. And I've been cold emailing as a photographer, and I've had the most awesome replies from people.
Really?
No.
I mean, no. I guess my curiosity came with people but were you getting replies?
I was getting replies. People got triggered.
They got triggered?
So in a very loving way, I would be very grateful for their response.
But hold on. What kind of email would you send out that would trigger somebody?
Oh, the one that we wrote together.
People got triggered by that?
Yeah. Who are you to tell me?
Oh, really?
Yeah. So...
Oh my God!
But I can show you the replies.
Okay.
By sharing, first of all, thank you for making effort to write me 3 paragraphs.
Okay.
And just acknowledging their context. And just sharing where I was coming from. It was really met in a beautiful way. But the first initial was like, "Boof, who the fuck are you?"
We need to read that tomorrow. Bring that just because for our next show. Bring the email that I wrote, and then I want to review it together with you.
We're going to change this. I have a new strategy.
A new strategy. Okay, we'll do that. But I think that's wonderful.
Yeah. So Andy, today we have Don Oakley.
Don Oakley. We have Don Oakley, and we haven't done our intro yet. And we're going to discuss spiritual humility with him on
A Wonderful Chaos.
See you soon. You know what I love?
What do you love, Andy Shalef?
I love that you sent me an email yesterday that says, Andy, can you read this and change it? So I totally
actually what I said to you is, Andy, can you read this and share with me how it makes you feel? Do you feel a contraction when you read it, or do you feel invited?
And what I felt when I read what you sent me is I felt detachment. I felt like you wanted to sell me something without actually connecting to me in any way.
Okay.
So when I rewrote it, just because I wrote it in a way which would at least elicit a response. The email you sent,
Well, let's get one thing straight. We wanted a response.
So the email you gave me, basically I could have ignored. That was what I felt.
Yeah.
Okay. So I wrote you back the email that I said, okay, if you send it this way, then you can most likely get a response. What I didn't know was that it would be a negative response that I couldn't have anticipated.
Well, I felt it, but I tried it.
Okay.
And let's just say
did you feel it? Then why didn't you trust your instinct?
Because I wanted to just try it and see because I also felt a reaction is a reaction. And based on that reaction, I'm going to get feedback and I can tweak it.
Okay, great. Well, let's agree on one thing, that if I write something for you and you feel resistance, let me know what you're feeling. And then I'll take that into account and see you're probably right. And I'd rewrite it again. So that's where I don't want you to trust me. Like, trust yourself, not me. That's the spiritual humility we're discussing today with Don Oakley.
Andy, we've got 10 people watching. Guys, who the fuck is going to watch something on spiritual humility?
I know.
Seriously.
This title, I didn't think we were going to pull in that many people. This is big.
Or maybe even the word spiritual makes me feel allergic. Are you spiritual?
I'm just wondering where they're coming from. This is crazy. Go away, guys. It's not going to be that interesting. Please don't show up. This is not for you.
JC is checking in from Atlanta.
I think yesterday's show got people very excited. They really like the distinction between coaching and mentoring.
I think those are the shows we start charging for.
I got some emails. People really were appreciative for that show. Really funny. I met Don through a mutual friend, and that was several years ago. And I met Don, and it was when Case was still alive. It was basically a few weeks before Case died. And Don,
for those of you who don't know, Case was Andy's
was my
mentor
mentor.
for 10 years.
And we went to his retreat center, and I mean, when I say beautiful, I can't put words to how beautiful his retreat center is.
How did it make you feel then?
It made me feel like a spaciousness. Like when we say home is where you feel this deep sense of I can die here. That's where I feel home. This is a place I felt like I could die.
Okay.
And that's the words I would give it. And what made it so ideal was that in a way it felt like safe and adventurous at the same time. He lives in a weird peninsula, so you actually drive through. The water goes around his whole retreat center. So in some weird way, you have to drive on the side of a road that leads to this like Mecca in the middle of this water that's surrounding the whole thing.
Wow.
So it's a really, really special place. And he's put his life's work into it. And
what's the place called?
It's called the Well-Being Retreat Center in Tazewell, Tennessee.
Okay, guys, check that out.
I've put a lot of people there, but the hardest thing is that he's got a retreat center, and it's called Spiritual, and he's in the middle of Tennessee, and Tennessee isn't the kind of place where this tends to happen. We do this in Northern California, or we do it in other Colorado, who knows where. So he's really venturing to put some thing in the world that isn't necessarily, in my opinion, we'll talk to him about it, but in the easiest place to have it grow. Right?
Like, I'm not familiar with the states, so Tennessee sounds like a redneck region.
Redneck would be a word you might use, but that would be pejorative and judgmental, and people from Tennessee wouldn't like that, so I wouldn't use that word on the show.
Okay, I'm going to take that away.
So you would never use that word again on this show. Let's just get that clear. They would be people that are basically far more conservative in their views, and they would certainly be, I would say, voting for Trump. Of course, that would be part of where he is. That kind of mentality. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I haven't met anyone that votes for Trump, so I wouldn't know.
Well, we won't discuss it because Don is that's what he's avoiding, I'm sure. No reason to alienate most of the people that might come to his retreat center. So we're going to discuss a little bit about his journey, a little bit maybe about the retreat center, and just, this topic of spiritual humility.
I love the word humility.
I love it because in a way, and I got caught up in it. I have to admit, when I had Case, my mentor, I thought his shit didn't stink. So I really got caught up in wow, he's got it. Nobody else gets it. Oh, and I think in some weird way, as we awaken, the experience is so raw and so real that we think other people have to have it. And we think the way we had it is the way that the other person should have it. Mm. And the sad part is that sometimes we have to go through that phase in order to come out the back end with the humility and realize, well, everyone has the journey they have, and I'm not the one to tell them how to have their journey. But that takes time. Often it's not easy to get there. So I think that's a really sweet thing to have a discussion around. Yeah, today.
Nice.
Yeah, cool.
Should we bring him on?
Let's bring him on. Hello, Don Oakley.
Hi, Andy. Hi, Bambos. Nice to see you. Nice to be with you.
Nice to be. So how does it feel to be a guru?
I don't even relate to that word.
Our first question is always a question that's not really a question. It's the most absurd thing I can say in my head, and that was the worst absurd thing I could say about you.
Yeah.
Andy sometimes likes to push some buttons.
What'd you say?
The word just has way too much baggage, and people, yeah.
And isn't it a shame, because it is a beautiful word, and if you use it from the typical, Indian usage of it, it's really just a teacher.
Teacher, right?
And it's so sad because it's been hijacked, of course, and therefore become its own object of disdain.
Well, it's given certain ideas about it that people presume that there's some special power, special knowledge that is unique and special, and that's where things start to go off track right there.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful word you just used, is that spirituality gets attached to special as opposed to an experience which each person can have for themselves.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. As soon as we get into the realm of specialness, we've divided ourselves from everybody else.
Yeah.
And somehow, because we've had some insight at a moment that has let's say a transformative effect, the mind is so quick to come in and say, "Oh, now you're special," right? And the tricky part is that it can actually feel like that. If one has been pursuing, the spiritual goal for, 10, 20, 30 years, and then finally there's some shift happens, it can feel special, but if you don't catch on to that delusion pretty quick, you're in real trouble. And the people around you are in real trouble.
I was going to say, I don't know if you're in trouble, but the people around you are.
Yeah.
Because Case, one thing that I found about my teacher, my guru, I would even use that word in this case, he also felt himself to be special.
He felt it.
Yeah, he felt himself to be special. And I noticed, I only I felt it a little bit, of course, but I learned it after his death. Because when I felt more humility towards everyone's own view of how the world functions, I saw, wow, there's a way that we all make sense of our experiences using different words. But a lot of times those experiences are very similar.
The experiences can vary. But it's, what's important is actually not the experiences. It's what can be recognized as being aware of that experience. And that's what remains. The experience itself comes and goes. Any experience, even, really powerful spiritual experiences. But there's a lot of people out there that are sort of collecting those experiences like, one would collect antique cars or something. So as if that's where the value was, to have, accumulated some experiences that you can talk about. And, what's actually of value in recognizing is just that awareness, which we all have already, is what is, that field of awareness is that within which all of those experiences happen. And that recognition is what remains. But what's not special about it is that everybody has that already.
Would you say everyone has it or has the potential to have it?
Everybody has it. They just don't recognize the significance of it. I mean, everybody has awareness, but they dismiss it. It's easy to dismiss and get focused on what appears within that field of awareness, all the objects, all the thoughts, all the beliefs, all the opinions, all of that.
Question for you is sort of, in your journey, where did your journey in this area begin and what brought you there?
I think, in my 20s, I wasn't interested in religion or spirituality. I had sort of avoided church from about age 12 on. But I was interested in what this life was actually about. It wasn't until in my early 30s that I even got the hint that had anything to do with spirituality. Spirituality, I don't really like it as a word, but I don't know what other word to use. It's sort of, just by using that word, we've suddenly divided life up into spirituality and something else.
So I hate the word as well. In fact, you saw Bambos and I at the beginning. We're like, we got 16 viewers right now to discuss spirit. How does that happen? Because in a way, we tend to move away from these type of words, because what I don't like is when people project a meaning into something which separates them from their experience. Because now if I think that there's something outside of myself, which is called spirituality, it means that now I've lost connection with what's going on in me at this moment, the awareness that you were talking about.
Yeah. Well, that's just what you said, Andy, is one of the basic misunderstandings about this whole journey, is that we dismiss the possibility of it being present in ourself and look for it somewhere outside. And we can do it. Doesn't really matter what field that we're doing it in. We could do it in sports or relationships or business or anything. It doesn't really matter. We're still looking outside, and we can look outside in terms of spirituality and cool experiences and anything.
Psychedelic. A lot of people do psychedelics nowadays to have a state experience, and then that state experience is the thing that they associate with whatever the being, sort of being one with everything would feel like.
Yeah. I mean, that may be helpful in terms of sort of breaking the trance, right? But if we're dependent on that to continue to get high, or to have some special vision, then we're still just we're still just
avoiding
it, right?
Yeah.
Just avoiding. Yeah. So but it can be useful in terms of coming to the realization that maybe there's something more going on here than first meets the eye, or that what we've first been taught about what life's about. And that can lead us into a deeper inquiry. Like, if I can see that under the effect of the drug, what is there in reality that I can access without the drug?
I've got a question. I'm going to wait for Bambas to go.
Don, I don't know why, but when you said the word journey, it kind of vibrated in me, but I can't really connect a question to it. But I just saw it in me like, oh, wow, journey. And there's something in the word journey. And I'm wondering if that speaks something to you.
Yeah. I mean, I see it as in a sense, something that we're all doing, right? We're all sort of exploring in this life in infinite number of ways, trying to find what it means for us, trying to find some path that feels satisfying or can give me happiness, or at least some measure of peace. And we explore that in all different ways. I mean, we might think that, gaining great wealth will give us a sense of peace and security and happiness. Or, we might think, 2 6-packs of beer will do it. Whatever that avenue is, as long as we're searching out, we're denying what is present here already. So as long as we're expecting something outside of ourselves to fulfill that sort of yearning, you could say, it'll always come up empty. It may be, fun and enjoyable and even satisfying for some period of time, but it won't ever rise to the level of being ultimately satisfying.
Yeah, it doesn't fill the hole.
Yeah. And I think one of the benefits of actually trying that, going out into life, taking this thing for a test drive and seeing what it can do, is that we get the chance to see the limitations of that.
Yeah.
Sometimes, for example, sometimes you hear parents who themselves never went to college think for their kids that college is the answer. If my kids could only go to college, then hey, everything would be fine. But if you have actually experienced something and realizing that it had value, sure, learned something, yes, and it still not resolves the whole question of this life. And so that has value. It gives us opportunity to look at something more deeply. So that's what I take to be the journey, that whole exploration. It doesn't have to be in a particular field It's all learning.
What you just said kind of hones back on the theme of the show being spiritual humility. And in a way, you brought it back to not only spiritual, but humility in terms of surrendering to the journey of another person. So when you spoke to the parents thinking that their children should, as the general kind of word there, go to college, then in a way, we're really speaking to the lack of humility in that sense towards the idea that just because I didn't do it doesn't mean that it would have been better.
Right. Yeah. It's always dangerous to impose, like you say, the word should on anybody else or whatever they happen to be doing, because I mean, just like we can look back on our own lives and see, a long and winding road, and you never know, where exactly it would lead, even though you think you might. And you never know what you're going to learn from different things, even though they could appear to other people as detours and, getting lost and off track. But it's usually those, so-called mistakes in life that we learn the most from. When we get it all right, it's nice. But the really deeper.
This led to, I didn't talk to my dad for 10 years of our lives, because he had a clear should of what I should have been doing with my life. And since I wasn't doing that, he disowned me and cut me out of the will and said, "You're dead" to me, that kind of thing. And it's interesting because all the things that I did that he disapproved of was exactly the reason why I was hired by the company I was hired by, that would appear to have been random, playing a saxophone, doing magic, traveling the world. Like, these were things that he would have thought, you're doing nothing with your life. This is what he would say over and over again. But those are exactly the reasons why the company that eventually did really hire me and put me in a high position was exactly for those reasons.
Yeah. I mean, that exploration is creative, right? It's following, our someplace where there's energy, and draws us in, and who knows what we'll learn from that. But, to apply whatever path we may have taken on some other person, like they should do this or it would be better if well, there's no way to know. I mean, that's totally presumptuous that we would
Clearly,
know
that's lacking the humility. I've got a question back to Bambos's question and an earlier statement you made when you were talking about journey. And I was thinking, I was curious because you sort of said 12 to 30, right? Those are the range before you kind of began maybe in your more determined, your spiritual journey. But from the 12 to the 30, what was it in that time that you felt like you were wrestling with? And like, how did that translate into more of a direct journey into whatever spirituality would then mean for you?
That's a good question, Andy.
It was your question. I just framed it differently. Sometimes Bambos asks a question, and I'm like, good question. I kind of would have liked to have you phrase it a little bit more like this.
Yeah. Well, during those years, I mean, in high school, my probably the thing that excited me most was swimming. That's what I was passionate about, and I succeeded at that. I was quite good in high school. I went to college. I went to Princeton, actually, and studied something that I was totally bored with. But I stuck it out for 3.5 years and dropped out of Princeton 5 months before graduating.
No, 5 months before graduating.
And enlisted in the Army, and then called my parents in that order.
Slow down for me. Sorry. You actually came to terms that you were completely miserable for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
And you were like, pretty much, fuck this. Can we say the fuck word today?
I know, can we?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
I don't know if I believe him. He has his own viewers coming in from. Let's say we'll be judicious on it.
Yeah.
So screw this.
Screw this. Like in that moment when you said the no, like what was going on for you?
Yeah, that's a big no.
It was there was a sense of not being not being willing to continue to do that any longer, not knowing what I really wanted to do, and feeling like I just needed to get this army thing out of the way. This is in the middle of the Vietnam War. Just get the army thing out of the way, and so that I could be free to do what I wanted to do. So in a sense, that was probably the dumbest decision I ever made in my life. But it was also the first decision I ever made in my life.
Hold on, slow down. You would say today that was the dumbest decision you'd made in your life today?
From a conventional perspective, right?
Oh, okay, sorry. But how do you honestly feel about it then?
Well, I feel like it was a transformative moment because it was the first time that I sort of stepped off the escalator.
For me, that moment you just spoke to, and I was happy that Bambos interrupted it. Those are the moments in life that I find to be the most important because I use the same, interestingly enough, the same terminology you do. Those are the moments I'm like, oh, I made a decision finally. And I find that those categorical decisions define my life more in alignment with where I want to go without even knowing where that is totally yet, but just knowing not this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it wasn't like a decision to do something because I like something else better. It was just being willing to step into the unknown because this paradigm that I was in wasn't working. So yeah, that decision changed things. Had I remained on that path, the future was, pretty well laid out in terms of profession and relationship and et cetera. And so to step off that, it changed. And I realized after that point, I was on my own. I wasn't, I couldn't just rely on the continuum that I had been prepped for by my parents and schools and everything up to that point. So that changed things. Fortunately, I didn't go to Vietnam. I was extraordinarily fortunate. I was in Germany for 2 years. And then after that, I spent a year and a half traveling in Europe. And then back in the days when the Muslims still liked Americans, I traveled overland through Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, into India, and hitchhiked down Malaysia and hitchhiked across Australia and et cetera. So
you did the whole backpack thing.
Yeah, it was just freedom, and my intent on that journey was to find out what I really wanted to do and where I wanted to live. And I came back, concluding that where I lived actually wasn't all that significant because I seemed to be carrying this baggage wherever I was going.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't that the big kind of the first book, The Last Letter? I spent 7 countries later. I said, I somehow there's one consistent problem that goes to each country, and it's me. Yeah. That's beautiful. I really, although we've honed in on it, I do want to put an exclamation on this one because I find it so important that when we talked about you having not finished that degree, there's so many people in life that I think don't understand the significance of making a categorical no decision to something and not knowing what the yes is. And I don't even know a lot of people in my own life that have had that experience, to be honest with you, because most people go from one thing to the next thinking that, oh, I'm going to be happier in the next thing.
Yeah, right. Well, we do that from moment to moment, right?
Yeah, we do. So for me, I wanted to celebrate that because on the show, we haven't had a lot of that discussion so far. So this is one of these life themes that I'd love to at least amplify. So people out there, if you're thinking to yourself, I'm not happy, and what's going to make me happy, and you're starting to look outside to figure out the other thing, the hardest lesson might be to stop what you're doing and not know what the next thing is going to be. And it's one of the most scary things you'll do in your life.
And you can call Andy if everything goes to shit.
When you're on the street and you're homeless and you can't eat a drink, but everyone's got to decide the risk they can take, of course. But that's one of the scariest things I ever had to do in my own life.
There have been a couple times. Go ahead, Bambos.
No, finish what you were saying.
Yeah, there have been a couple times in my life where it's felt like one thing has ended, and it's like you're saying, Andy, where another thing hasn't yet begun, and you didn't have any idea what that next thing was going to be. And I always found those periods, I mean, even 6 months, a year, I mean, without knowing, were very fruitful times, because somehow that creative energy, sort of pushed us off in a totally different direction. Yeah, I found out at age 39 or 40, hadn't had a steady job for most of those years. And age 39 or 40, I realized that I had some interest in being in the business world, being an entrepreneur, being and I was totally surprised. I realized that one day in a bookstore, just wandering around and being fascinated by the business section just blew me away. I had no idea. And that took me on a 20-year journey after that.
And you were successful in business, as far as I know.
I was. I got licensed as a civil engineer when I was 40 years old. Had to learn that field, and did consulting work. Started developing land. Built a number of houses out in Portland, Oregon, and that had actually allowed us to purchase this land in Tennessee and do what we're doing now. So. But even this retreat center here, it has evolved organically. We moved here, Patty and I, because we really love this land. I really love being out in nature, and we thought, well, maybe some people, friends will come and visit sometimes. That's how it started out, and so. Since then, the last 11 years, it's just sort of grown, and as we've seen the need for it. But the decision to come here was just a leap of faith. We knew exactly one person in Tennessee, and but we really love this land. So,
yeah, the land is incredible. What were you going to ask before?
I want to see pictures.
Yeah.
My first impression of you, Don, is like, oh, wow, I like being around this person without knowing him. Like, you have this calmness. And like, sometimes when I look at my food on the plate, I'm always, my imagination is always tracing it back to where it came from. So I'm wondering, this calmness, what would you say were the emotions that you had to struggle with? And I'm talking about the dark emotions now, like anger. Like, did you have things that you would say really challenged you during your life to find peace with?
I would say frustration, impatience, anger. Those were all part of my journey. Also, incredible shyness. Growing up, fear of talking to really anybody, but especially more than one person at a time. But that, a lot of that, working through that frustration, impatience, anger, just part of it was the realization that it just doesn't work well. To see that over and over again. Part of the anger, part of that was chemical, which was really interesting. I had mercury poisoning back in the 90s from overeager dentists, and that affected me emotionally. I didn't realize that until I had that mercury removed from my body, which was about a 3-year journey there. So that was very interesting.
That's amazing. Never knew. When was the first time you did acid?
26, 27, somewhere in there.
How was it?
It was, as I described before, it sort of broke the trance. And it was my first glimpse into oneness, actually. And so that inspired me. But I did it maybe 8 or 10 times. But what it took me to was the desire to find out what was there without the drug, and so that pushed me in the direction of meditation and more inward search. But that I mentioned this business period that went on for 20 years. During that time, that's all I did. I didn't do spirituality. I didn't meditate hardly at all. But that was my practice. That was my full practice. But just that discipline had power in terms of learning what I could do out in the world, on that level. But the thing that sort of brought it to its knees was a momentary experience. It was literally pulling up to a stop sign, and before I pulled away from the stop sign, I realized that everything that I was doing, I was doing it successfully, I was doing it, ethically, etc. But everything that I was doing, I realized that I was doing out of a deep need for respect.
And where did that come from?
I would say probably my, childhood. Overbearing father, had to do with my shyness and questioning my own worthiness, and so this whole venture was, in a sense, to prove to myself that there was value there, and but to see that clearly in a flash, that it was all about appreciation, respect, that whole genre of positive feedback. And once I saw that, within a year after that, maybe a year and a half, I'd sold the whole business. Again, not knowing what I was going to do next, but it was time to do something else.
That's beautiful. Because I often speak about my own experience in that regard, is that after Dad disowned me, I went and started to be successful in business. And I did that in order to build up some self-confidence. And even speaking to him maybe for like a moment on the phone would take away like 6 months of self-confidence from me. So I couldn't even speak with, I was happy he disowned me and said I was dead, because in a way what he gave me was the opportunity to grow independent of that kind of weight on my shoulder. But the funny thing was that at one point I also had the experience that I saw my life was a reaction to that moment and that my upbringing, and I didn't actually like what I had become. And from that moment, it took me 2 years to take off the golden handcuffs, because if you're getting paid a lot of money for things that are easy for you to do, it's really hard to say, I'm going to leave this. Yeah.
I know the feeling.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah. And then I guess just to complete, okay, go ahead, Bambos.
No. We love when people
interrupt.
No, they interrupt us.
I'm on a satellite, so there's a bit of a lag. So, just to complete the story of the journey, it wasn't until I was maybe 25 years ago that I picked up a book by Eckhart Tolle, Power of Now, and before he was that well known, and it was it wasn't like I hadn't read those kind of ideas before, but I I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't sufficiently disillusioned. And but that book really struck me, and I spent a lot of time with Eckhart, listening to him, going to his retreats for the next several years. Through him, I met Adyashanti, who's an American man who's come out of the Zen tradition, and have been spent a lot of time with him over from probably 2003 to 2008, and then did volunteer work in his office for several years before we came here. So both of those teachers were huge
influences on you.
Yeah.
I have a question. I have an interesting question from me out of curiosity. So when I met you physically last, right, in person, you had a retreat center, which, I told you before we went on air, I've told this joke 100 times to everyone in my life. I'll say it again. So how do you make $1 million on a retreat center? You start with 3. Like, so that unfortunately has been spoken 100 times over to everyone I know, because everyone who goes on their spiritual journey says, oh my God, how cool would it be if I find a place and I invite people that I love and I build the thing I want. Like that's kind of this weird dream that many people on their journey have. And you acted on that dream, right? But the thing go ahead.
No, I finished your question, Andy.
Okay. So the curiosity I have is when I met you, you were a retreat center host. And then through the years, having not really interacted, I saw you transfer to offering monthly kind of courses, of course, pre-COVID, and basically taking up space like an Adyashanti might take up space, or like an Eckhart Tolle. So what changed for you that you said, okay, I'm now 60 plus years old, and I'm going to take the center stage? Like, what the hell happens at that age where you say, okay, I'm now going to do the thing that I've watched other people do so long?
And we threw the shyness out the door.
Yeah, exactly. That as well.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think the first thing I did is I thought, well, I'll just try to write down some things and see what that sounds like. And then, maybe I'll put a book out there. And before that, I found it very difficult to talk about any of this. I mean, there was the experience of it, but actually translating it into words was really difficult. And when I tried to do it before writing this book, it just came out superficial and phony. So, but through writing this book, it sort of clarified some ability to be able to translate the experience into words. But it was about, I wrote the book fairly quickly in a few months, but then I sat on it for 6 months and looked at it again and wondered whether I wouldn't be too embarrassed if it was put out in public. And, so it was another year or so before it was actually published. But that was, I had no idea whether it would be well received or not. And I certainly didn't have any idea about whether I could talk about it or not.
How old are you, by the way, when this book is written? Just give me a perspective on this.
67, 68, somewhere in there.
67, 68. You write the book. Great. And then from there, help me understand, what is it that happened through you writing the book that shifted in your system? So what, you alluded to it, but is there something directly you could say there was an epiphany or something that came clear to you through this action?
Yeah, well, it just got more clear. The actual shift, it was a series of shifts, but they were back probably 15 years ago. But my experience, it takes some time for that to really settle in. you can have the realization, but the implications of that take some time. And so that's what that sort of digestive period was about. But the first time I ever tried to talk about this subject in public, I mean, I prepped for the talk for, I don't know, a month, and had some PowerPoint slides and everything. It was total disaster. Patty's laughing over here.
She had to live through it.
Yeah, it was probably as equally painful for her. So a few months after that, I realized that there was still some, I don't know, movement to talk about it in public. So I'd actually not prayed very much before. But the prayer I said out loud was that if you, whatever universe, existence, source, however, want me to be doing this, I need some help. So that's how I've held it since then. No, I don't. Yeah. So that seems to make it possible. It doesn't feel. I mean, it's clearly, words spoken out of this mouth, and things coming from memory sometimes. But it feels more like a co-creative process. So it's enjoyable. It's and hopefully it has some value.
I really can relate with how you've your journey in my own life, because Bambos can attest to. He's always been a little bit frustrated with me that I haven't put myself in the world or tried to share whatever it is that I'd learned. And although I joke and I can throw together sentences that sound, there is always a shyness that's also underneath it that is living in humility, because I think most things can be solved with love. So if I just love you, that should be enough. But when you stand on a stage, you have to present, you have to discuss, you have to interact with these very intelligent people who are hiding their feelings through words. And I've often felt like, it isn't necessarily comfortable for me to be in that position, because I won't feel seen. Because if I go and hug them, they're going to look at me and think, "Are you crazy?" So, and to compensate for that, I've written the 2 books, and I too use those books, not knowing what they were going to be before they were written, as almost a way to refine my thinking and allow it to tell me whatever it was meant to be.
Right. Yeah.
And
you realize when you're.
Go ahead.
You realize when you're writing it down and rereading it, you realize where the fuzzy spots are, and that really helps clarify one's thinking.
Yeah.
On it.
And I think that what you then suggested and what I can relate to is, where does whatever the word we use, where does it meet me? And it's kind of beautiful, because as we speak now, I look at our comments. We do the show daily, and there's this friend who's now in he's in Atlanta. He drives all over the place, but he's JC Barnett. He's originally from Kentucky. So he just found his way into our lives he was a high school a teacher of mine. And this Bola Long character who's in South Africa, who's written several comments we'll bring on. And it's amazing, because these people, although they also enjoy being with us, they don't realize that there's a co-creation that happens, because without them, it wouldn't really be joyous to be here.
Yeah.
And I feel the same when we speak with you around that process as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't, growing up, I ended up studying chemistry, and studied the subject in college that frustrated me endlessly just because the subject matter was chemical engineering. And I entered all of that simply because I was good at it, but I had this very firm belief that creativity was just not something in my life, period. And it also wasn't until my 30s that I realized that the creative part wasn't something that we do by our own bootstraps. It's something that's available to us if we're open to it. And that was a total surprise to discover that. And it's been a joy since then to realize that there's, something, beyond, just this conceptual mind that we grew up with, that can inform us in ways that are, just joyful and beautiful and creative, and that's a large part of the how this is unfolded in surprising ways.
Connecting back to the subject title of this, spiritual humility. Given the journey you've been on, that you're now giving your own courses, and how do you experience it today when you're confronted with individuals that have a very strong idea of what right and wrong is, especially where it comes to, say, religion or spirituality? How do you see yourself today interacting or reacting to that?
Well, I mean, probably the hardest people to work with are the ones that are quite certain about how things work. And I see this process of really being opening ourselves to something you could say beyond ourselves, although I don't consider it to be other than ourselves. At the same time, is really a process of undoing things that we're quite certain of. So the teachings are really in that direction. What can we say with absolute certainty?
But if I go back to the question of how you specifically interact or deal with an individual that has a very strong-minded idea of right and wrong, what spirituality is, how do you see yourself interacting with the person in the moment?
In the moment, I do what I can to try to just reduce the level of certainty. Okay. And people may be receptive to that or may not be. A lot of it has to do with how much they've suffered. It seems to be what brings a lot of people to spirituality in the first place. I mean, it doesn't require that, but it seems like a lot of times, we're quite certain about how life should look and going along, and things are pretty well. And then we get whacked by a death or a marriage gone bad, or business failure or health issue or something. And then that has enough power to shift our willingness to look at.
Okay, so you would say, if you were going to say if you made it an equation, which it isn't, of course, but you would say the degree to which an individual has experienced pain is also reflective of the spiritual humility that they allow in themselves. Would that be fair?
Yeah, there may be some relationship there. I think in some people, I mean, you can also go into despair and depression, which
obviously
is helpful. But I think if people are paying attention, then those kind of jolts to the system can shift our course and cause us to be open to other ideas. But I really do see this journey as being much more of an undoing than any kind of an accumulation of knowledge or experiences or status, or it doesn't really have anything to do with that. It's the recognition of what we are, and coming back to that.
if we take what you just said, because I mean, that's a theme that comes up a lot, especially if we look in, say, more of a Buddhist practice, that in some ways you would almost say if there's an arc to our journey, then the arc would be the accumulation of identities that actually create us to feel confident in who we are, a wealth to give us security and comfort, and all these things that we project that we need for happiness. And then at the end, you get to whatever the plateau is of what you might have expected to bring you happiness. And then you look down and you're like, oh shit, that was an illusion that apparently I needed to get to the top of the mountain to be able to know that that wasn't really the top.
Yeah.
And I think that's the weird thing. Go ahead.
That's a pretty good description of it. I mean, that's the trajectory that a lot of people go to. It's, I think, one of the reasons that you tend to see people with a few years behind them coming to these events more so than when you're younger.
We're in Amsterdam, so they're usually only kids at our events. Your satellite broke up a little bit, so we need to see if we can get you re-kiltered again. We see a half smile. Now we're back. We have you. Yeah.
So I once had the experience, probably age 30, early 30s anyway, of some guru type teacher saying, just lie down and die. And I had no idea what kind of power this person would have. And I thought, well, I'll give it a try. And so, I lay down and then they had a couple women sort of mourning over me, and which I was quite fascinated with, of course. And I realized in that moment that there was no way I was ready to do that.
Oh, yeah.
That I felt like I needed to live. There were things that I wanted to experience, and I wasn't ready to look at, just sort of bypassing that life experience. Mm-hmm. So that was a valuable lesson, actually.
Yeah, I have a question for you staying with that, which I think is an incredible Bambos, I think you've got an exercise for your authentic relating evening now. Bambos has authentic relating twice a week where they do experiments, and this sounds like one of the more intense ones one can have.
An announcement, I've stopped.
No. Okay, well, that's a different. So the question I have for you is, how is that for you today?
Well, in probably all of my life, I was curious about this sense of impending death. And the question would have been framed in the sense of what would I have had to do in this lifetime or understood or accomplished or in order to feel like I had lived a life fully expressed and would be okay with dying. What would that life need to look like? And the interesting part was that it was the fulfillment of that question was always in the future, was never in the past, right? So, but there was a time, this was in the middle of when I was working 80 hours a week, and the question became more insistent, and for whatever reason during the day I'd be working, but whenever I went to the bathroom, this question would come up about death. So it was present, throughout the day for several years, and it was during a time when I was working too many hours. I was overweight. I wasn't exercising. So, it wasn't only a theoretical question at that point. And there was 2 or 3 nights, probably separated over a course of a year, where I was alone, dark room, watching TV. And it felt like the Grim Reaper came into the room. That's what it felt like, energetically. And each of those 2 or 3 times, it was like, okay, am I ready? Am I willing to do this? Am I, and it sort of went, whatever I was experiencing went up into my head. Mm. And the experience may have lasted maybe 30 seconds or so. And then I realized that I just went conceptual on it. And then the experience faded, and then I thought afterwards, oh, I missed the opportunity to really see that. And then I don't know, maybe my mother had died that year, which is another whole story, which was really instructive for me. But there was another time, maybe a year after these several events, where it was daytime, and I was just walking across my living room, and this feeling just rushed in, and for whatever reason, it wasn't courage, it wasn't anything other than I just have to know. And there was just that willingness to accept that eventuality, whatever it looked like, wholeheartedly. It wasn't a decision. It didn't take, there wasn't a thought process involved. It would just happen from one step to another as I was walking. And that was the end of that.
Yeah. As I hear you speak, the word that comes up in me is the surrender, finally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 It's sort of like letting life win, right? Yeah. It's going to do that anyway, but it's just sort of coming to terms with that.
Yeah.
But that's been a huge freedom since then. I mean, that was probably 10 years ago. So the freedom since then is just to be relieved of that that concern at all.
How is your wife with that freedom?
How's my life or my wife?
No, your wife.
She's good.
Yeah. You're putting him on the spot.
No. I say that because my wife isn't happy with that freedom in me. So I just want to know if it was the same for you. She doesn't like me discussing that it's okay if I were to move on. This is it's all good. She doesn't like that.
Yeah, it is all good though.
Yeah. We have some comments. We're over an hour, but I've so enjoyed that I'd love to at least share some of the things that are coming in. Bolalong, very early on in our time, said spirituality is an interesting topic for many who need to connect with themselves, which is basically the core of what we said spirituality was when we began this whole thing. He also says, what I don't like about the word spirituality is that it means different things to different people, but most of the time we assume we are talking about the same thing. That's always true. Yeah. J.C. Barnett, who's often in the Tennessee area. In fact, one time I said he came from Tennessee and he was a bit offended because he's from Kentucky. So he sent 3 baseball hats just to let us know for sure that he came from Kentucky. So Bambos got those 2 days ago. He is in Tazewell, Tennessee, JC. I can give you the details if you're interested. Yeah. And when I was sharing my gratitude to Bolalong for always sort of being along for our ride, he says it allows him to travel to the comfort of my home. In the comfort of his home, I get to meet interesting people that I never would knew existed, and their stories are warming. And we have Narissa, who you might know here in Nashville, been enjoying the conversation since 10:30 Central Standard Time. I appreciate hearing about Dawn's journey. Hugs to you and Patty. So she knows you. And Carol Z. Shane, I assume you know this person as well. She's saying hello. Yeah.
Okay.
Beautiful. Thank you for being with us, Dawn. It was really great to spend the time with you.
Yeah, lovely to be with you too, Andy and Bamos. Nice to meet you and spend this time with you as well. So it's really a joy and a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
For people that want more information, that are and I said this early, and it sounds like a horrible promotion, but I don't tend to promote things that I don't really feel that strongly about. If anyone is looking to do a retreat anywhere in the US and they think, where is like a special undiscovered place, which is so magical that I can tell Andy you're full of shit if it isn't as magical as it is, as he says it is, I'll stand behind those words. It's Tazewell. Again, it's the Well-Being Center, a retreat center in Tazewell, Tennessee. And it's just magical. If you go there, you'll understand. I think it's the kind of place you can't put words to. People have to visit and understand what it's all about, right? The fact that you're surrounded on three sides by water is just amazing to me. That you drive into your location, right? It's really you found an incredible place to spend the last years of your life. That's for sure. You know.
Yeah, I feel very grateful for it.
Yeah. So thank you for that. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we go?
No, it's just a pleasure to be with you both and to spend this time together. I found it really enjoyable, and I really had a good time being with you. So
yeah,
thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Send you both a hug. Yeah, I know Patty's in the background. I love you, Patty. We'll talk later, I'm sure. Bye to you both. Yeah.
All right.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. Sweet.
Yeah.
Really, really beautiful.
Yeah, I'd like to do a talk show on surrender, like specifically on surrender.
I thought we had a talk. I thought we did an episode on surrender once. No, or am I forgetting?
I think you're forgetting. Old age.
Okay, it is. So we'll be doing this show on surrender. I'll put it in the calendar. Wow. That was really a beautiful journey.
At some point, I stopped listening to him because it was like a meditation being with him.
Yeah.
So the content didn't really matter anymore.
I found as he shared the journey of his life, I saw kind of a movie in my head play out, seeing these like junctions of periods where there was important shifts that led to new steps.
Is that going to be your new book?
Yeah. I've had enough of new books for the moment. This show is my new book.
What do we have tomorrow, Andy?
Tomorrow it's a potluck dinner tomorrow, Bambus.
So we still don't know.
I'm confident we're going to have somebody. Who that somebody is, I don't yet know. So yeah, join us. I believe it may be somebody from my childhood, as I told you, but I haven't spoken with them yet. Let's just take for the moment that they're home. They're not doing anything else. So I have no reason to believe they can't be on the show.
Great.
And the man has written 2 books on police officers that have been killed in the line of duty. Books sold well. Blue Lives Matter was the title of the book, which is quite controversial, but I don't believe he wrote it to be controversial. I think he had these as friends and he wanted to share their journey. And I thought it would be incredible to have a discussion with him. So we'll see, but that's who I'm hoping to have on tomorrow.
And if not, we'll do surrender.
Will we do surrender? No, we'll find somebody else. We can't do too many of our own shows. We don't want to spoil people. We'll see you next time. On
a wonderful
chaos.